so I'm having a strange feeling of deja vu. So I'm going to pretend to be An. An would have very much liked to have been here, but I think he has a very good excuse of being on his honeymoon. I'm sorry you didn't get to meet An because he's a very dynamic person, and he would be jumping all over around the stage and dragging each of you off of the stage to demonstrate different points. So you may be actually lucky that you're not. Don't have An because I won't be dragging you off the stage. But hopefully I'll do some justice to his presentation. And again, this was part of the same GRA Jackpots study that was recently published. I'm going to change a bit of his presentation. I've even changed a bit of the title to suit my understanding and comfort level. His was more focused on some of his theoretical explanations, and I'm going to be focusing more on the outcomes rather than trying to do much interpretation of what the results mean. So there's a little bit of a change there. So we're looking at two structural features, progressive and deterministic features of jackpots. These are jackpots pay out in different ways. And these are two different ways in which they pay out. Not everybody, of course, knows. They think a jackpot is a jackpot, and naive gamblers, just very occasional recreational gamblers may never even think about how a jackpot pays out. But my assumption is, and I think it's a pretty safe one, that people with regular gambling experience may be much more aware of how different jackpots work. And these are two common features of jackpots in Australia in terms of the determinants of how they pay out, and we'll explain that in just a second, what these two features are. So, as before, there's shockingly little research on structural features of EGM jackpots or jackpots in general, except for now. Now there's a bit in this study. And this particular study that we're talking about is looking at those two common features, progressive and deterministic, in an experimental paradigm, and looking at also their potential interactive effects on intensity of gambling, the same things I talked about before, which is speed of betting, bet size, persistence in betting, and also gambling enjoyment from those different features. So what is a progressive jackpot? Well, there's a little bit of I guess, confusion about what progressive means, but I'll tell you what I say progressive means. Progressive means, and according to regulation within the state of Queensland, this is what progressive means, which is that the jackpots incrementally grow in value, which as players place additional bets. So you'll see these jackpot prizes on the machines, and then, as people are playing, the jackpots are slowly ratcheting up as bets are being placed. The jackpot sizes go up and up and up. In Australia, both in Queensland, at least that I'm aware of, and New South Wales, which I'm also familiar with, this is the most common type of jackpot. You'll often see a jackpot prize that will be $6,000 or $4,000 that will actually be a progressive jackpot. It's just reached an upper limit, so that's what happens with these things, is the progressive jackpots will keep going up and up and up until they hit a maximum limit prescribed by the machine manufacturer and also regulation, and then they'll stick there. The jackpot prize will still accumulate, but those extra accumulated dollars will then just be added to the machine when the jackpot pays off. It will be added to that base level. So even though it doesn't seem like all of the machines are progressive, almost all the machines are progressive in practice when you go out into the venues, at least in Queensland and New South Wales. The reason why the term is confusing is because progressive is often used in the industry to indicate linked to machines where a jackpot prize is connected to several other machines, either in the venue itself or even wide area jackpots that are linked, where a lot of different machines all contribute to one jackpot prize that could be won on one of those many machines that are connected to it, and that's what's called a progressive jackpot. They also increment in value, but to be progressive, you don't actually have to be linked to other machines. And of course, the non-progressives are the ones that are less common, at least in Queensland and New South Wales, and they just have a fixed prize amount. So they just have whatever, $5,000 or $2,000 on the machine. It pays off. There's an accumulation of the prize money in the background, but it will always remain the same jackpot prize that's available. Once that pays off, then it automatically resets to exact same amount. Okay, so a little bit of theory here is, well, why should people prefer progressive to non-progressive type jackpots, or vice versa? There could be this rolled over effect that's happening where gamblers are encouraged to bet more to increase the accumulated amount of jackpots because it seems like a recoverable investment. So yes, they're betting, they see the jackpot going up slowly, but they just see that as each bet that they make is an investment that they'll eventually recoup when they win that jackpot that is due to them, in essence. So it's just rolled over. And there's a lot of evidence from lotteries that this in fact happens. So when lottery prizes, these are those scratch ticket sort of lottery prizes, roll over, they get a much bigger sales boost. So if in 1 week nobody wins the jackpot prize, the prize rolls over, and then they start adding new money from more people who are buying lottery tickets, and the prize grows again. Every time it rolls over, ticket sales surge, at least in lottery prizes, and that's why there's some evidence that there is, in fact, this rolled over effect, at least in lottery type products. The other alternative is this explanation of sunk costs, where gamblers may perceive their gambles as either sunk cost investments in the jackpot prize or non-sunk cost investments. And what is a sunk cost? Well, a sunk cost is probably a more proper way of seeing your investment in the jackpot prize, which is when you play a progressive machine and the machine goes up a little bit because you've invested money in the machine, that investment is probably going to go to somebody else. So it's what economists would call a sunk cost. You've paid something, it's not coming back, baby. It's gone. So irrespective of the fact that the jackpot is increasing, it has no relevance. Okay, so now we want to just briefly describe deterministic jackpots. What are those? Deterministic jackpots have a guaranteed payout at a fixed number of bets, which is determined in advance and at random. This is a jackpot payout mechanism whereby the jackpot is guaranteed to pay out within a fixed time. Often this will be, well, this jackpot will keep incrementing. If it's a progressive jackpot, it will keep incrementing until it hits, let's say, $25,000, and it's guaranteed to pay off at some time between where it is now and when it hits the top. And that's the sort of nature of a deterministic jackpot. Now, more often, the more common, at least in Australia, jackpot payout mechanism is a non-deterministic jackpot, where there's a random number generator, and it just keeps saying with each bet, is this a jackpot prize? No. Is this a jackpot prize? No. Is this a jackpot prize? And on a frequency basis, every once in a while it will pay off. So the key difference being there is that when you're sitting at a non-deterministic jackpot, there's no memory to it at all. Just like any other win, a jackpot might appear or it might not appear. In a deterministic jackpot, it's quite different, however, because the jackpot will eventually pay off. That's guaranteed. It's already decided in advance, and the computer has it in its brain, or the EGM has it in its brain when it's going to pay off. It's not telling you, of course, that it's going to pay off at some point. And the interesting psychological part about that is that as people play the machines, if it hasn't, unlike any other jackpot feature, as they play, the more they play, the closer they are getting to the jackpot prize. And that's a literal truth, because it will pay off eventually. So the probability of winning the jackpot increases the more they play. Now, of course, you can never know when it goes off, but your probability is getting better and better. Nearly Hing, who's here, had reported some evidence that people would take advantage of the system and would actually go to New South Wales. In New South Wales, they would actually have these what would you call them, sort of consortiums of people who would go around and try and play on machines that are these deterministic machines that haven't paid off, and take advantage of that by dominating those machines and intimidating people to get off, which of course made the other patrons unhappy, and it made the venues unhappy because they didn't like people bullying other people on the machines. So there's a whole history of those sort of things going on. So we wanted to see both of these features in one experiment, how they potentially determine how people play on the machines. A little, just like the other experiment, a little addition to that is we wanted to look at jackpot size as well as the size of the reward, whether we had a $500 jackpot or a potential $25,000 jackpot. Again, we simulated this by showing people a jar with either $500 cash or $500 lottery tickets that were potential for a $25,000 prize, with the idea that a large reward might be more attractive. Okay, so on outcomes of gambling intensity, which is what we're interested in, bet size, bet speed, persistence, and gambling enjoyment, Likert scale, whether they liked it or they didn't, they enjoy the experience, and also GSR arousal, how exciting they found the machines from a physiological basis. And here I've phrased these as questions. They're a little bit statistic speak, but we didn't have any real pre-existing strong notions of which one would be better than the other. So these are what you might call two-tailed sort of tests. We were wondering whether progressive or non-progressive jackpots cause more gambling intensity, whether deterministic or non-deterministic jackpots, as described, would cause more gambling intensity. Are there main effects for jackpot size, and are there also any interactive effects between these different jackpot arrangements? So the study had 123 participants, and they were also recruited from newspaper flyer advertisements, but this time in Bundaberg, Australia. 75% had gambled on some kind of casino-style game, including EGMs, within the last 12 months. So this is, a much more gambling experienced group than you'd find sort of people chosen at random. And you can see a little over half had at least some gambling problems, and about 10% had some severe gambling problems who were participating in the experiment. So just like the other experiment that I reported on, this was programmed with a fixed sequence of 5 wins within the first 20 plays, and then infinite losses thereafter. So much like real gambling, you win for a while, and then you lose for a very long time. And so it had that, but that consistency is important so that the wins happen in exactly the same places for each of the different conditions, so there's no real difference. We try to keep the conditions as similar as possible. And of course, they had the typical musical sounds associated with play. You can see that the jackpot prize amount is shown in a window at the very top. So it shows how much you could potentially win if you win the jackpot prize. We didn't tell them, of course, what sequence of symbols would produce the jackpot. In real machines, it's often not a sequence of symbols anyway. It's just that it just goes to a separate jackpot machine, and any sequence, even a losing sequence, can produce a jackpot win. So in that way, it's much like real machines. So much like the other procedure, we give them $20 on their arrival. They completed a brief questionnaire, including the lie bet scale, and then they were asked whether they wanted to gamble with their $20 compensation, and the compensation was retrieved from them if they wanted to gamble on the machine, and that 2,000 cents were added to the poker machine for them to play with. And this again created the true impression that they're gambling with their own money, and that's the sort of important thing, is that we wanted that psychological and in fact true perception that they're gambling with their own money without actually getting people to commit financial resources that they had before coming in. We used stratified random assignment to equalize the different conditions based on gender, age, and lie bet scores, so we'd have relatively equal number of people with gambling problems within both gambling problems and gender and age within all the different cells of our experiment. And each participant had a finger sensor measuring skin conductance so we can see their level of excitement. And as I said, we showed them the prize in the glass jar. So here's the design for those statistical boffins out there. It's an ANOVA, pretty simple, 2 by 2 by 2, progressive, non-progressive, deterministic, non-deterministic, and small and large jackpots to define all the cells in a factorial design. We also used as control variables the PGSI, age, and gender as controls. Even though they're relatively equal between conditions, we also included that as a statistical control. Okay, so the effect of jackpots is largely psychological. Again, we weren't looking at the effect of jackpots winning a jackpot. We were looking at the effects of what's a psychological effect of a potential jackpot win. That is, telling the participants, maybe you might win a jackpot. Here's how much it might be. Here's a jar. I'm showing it in your face. And then describing how the jackpot is paid out and seeing if the different mechanisms by which a potential jackpot could be paid out change people's behavior on the machines, change their beliefs about what's the appropriate amount to bet and how fast they should bet and all those sort of things. So I can't show you all of the example instructions because there's a lot of different combinations, but this is just a sample. The sample is intended to show you that I used relatively neutral language. The language is such that it's not supposed to be a motive or telling people that this is great or whatever. It's just very functional in describing each of the conditions and exactly how the jackpot mechanism, as simply as we could, actually pays out the prize. So here's an example of a deterministic, progressive, and large jackpot. So the $25,000 prize, that's the large jackpot, will be shown on the top of the screen once you begin. You'll notice that the jackpot prize grows with every bet you make. That's describing the progressive nature. It goes on and on. And in fact, when the machine starts, it does grow with every bet that they make. The ticket jackpot will pay out after a certain number of bets have been placed. Okay, that's the deterministic nature of it. And the number of bets that must be made before the jackpot is triggered has been determined in advance and at random. So that's exactly how a deterministic jackpot works. It's determined in advance at random that it will pay off at some point in the future after a certain number of bets are placed. And all of the other ones had similar sort of non-emotive descriptions for how the jackpots actually paid out. So the dependent variables are the behavioral outcomes: bet size, bet speed, persistence, as well as subjective enjoyment and playing the EGM, physiological arousal as measured by skin conductance. ANOVA, ANCOVA model rather, using progressive features, deterministic features, and jackpot size, and the covariates that I've already mentioned. So here's a look at the results. The results that we have, so through all those flourishes, the results that we have only worked, we only found significant results on bet size. And in addition, we only found a significant three-way interaction, okay? Now, for those of you who are statisticians out there or have some statistical knowledge, three-way interactions are incredibly hard to understand and explain. I think there was a famous quote by a statistician. I think it might have been Cohen, a really well-known statistician, that said he finds two-way interactions difficult to explain and three-way interactions impossible, and that it's funny because he's a very famous statistician. So we can look at this. It's late in the day, people. So rather than trying to read the tea leaves, which I think is quite impossible in this thing, another way of looking at interactions is to decompose them into their simple effects. So looking at all the pairwise comparisons between different conditions, it turns out that any complex interaction is composed of these simple effects comparisons between the two ones. So what I'm going to really concentrate here on is what specific combinations of jackpot descriptions have the highest average bet size, okay? So the highest average bet size here, it turns out that they all happened in the large jackpot condition. That's where we showed them all the lottery tickets. The first one, the really high one, the highest one that is a deterministic jackpot. This is one that it's got to pay off after a fixed number of bets that have been determined at random. And that is also non-progressive, I don't know what that is, progressive, It's also non-progressive, which means that, it's a fixed prize. It doesn't increment at all. Okay, this is a bit abnormal because normally a deterministic jackpot will be a progressive jackpot that will pay off until it hits somewhere between now and when it hits at the top end. But that, in fact, may be why it seems to be so attractive. It looks like it could pay off at any time, you know, in essence. That I'm there at that top amount. Oh my gosh, it could pay off at any amount, and they seem to be much more aggressively on bet size after you know, receiving that jackpot instruction. What's the other one? The other high one, and that's, by the way, that's about a little over 20% higher than the average of all other conditions. So it's not only statistically higher, it's substantially higher than the bet size of all the other conditions combined. The other big one is the non-deterministic jackpot. That is a normal sort of one that just pays off at random. You know, a random number generator determines whether this is a winning trial or not. Also progressive, that is, it increments slowly up. Interestingly, this is the most common type of jackpot in Australia, at least. A progressive jackpot that goes up and that could pay off at any time. And it's also the one that has one of the highest encouraging effects on people's gambling behavior of all the combinations that we studied. It's about 18% higher than the average of all the other conditions. Okay, so here's a small jackpot condition. You can kind of see them if I put them side by side. Slightly smaller, but that's not main effect. Statistically significantly different between small and large jackpots, but you can see that small jackpots in general have some of the lower jackpot or bet sizes. Okay, so importantly, participants experience similar levels of excitement and enjoyment on the machines, irrespective of how we describe these jackpot payoff mechanisms. So despite the fact that it affected their behavior in terms of bet size, it didn't seem to influence what enjoyment that they got out of the machines. And again, as I said before, this is important because we don't want to make the machines unattractive, because if we make machines unattractive, then it won't be accepted by industry or anybody else. Okay, and implications and final thoughts. Large jackpots can encourage riskier gambling behavior, especially when the jackpot structure is deterministic and non-progressive, or progressive and non-deterministic. And the progressive and non-deterministic, again, at least in Australia, is the most common type of jackpot that there is. These riskier EGM jackpots, as compared to less risky products, do not appear to increase enjoyment, so they're not any more fun. They just make you bet more, or let's bet higher sizes. And lastly, the smaller, non-deterministic jackpot prizes have the lowest behavioral risk profile. So if you just make the jackpots much smaller and make them pay off just at random, those are the ones that are not necessarily encouraging people to bet at higher bet sizes. And that's it. Thank you.